Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another session of the Dean of Student Affairs Leadership Conversations. My name is Qondisa Sibego, and I'll be your moderator for today's conversation. So to ensure an interactive and exciting session today, I would love to encourage you to ask as many questions as you'd like to, but please ensure that you put all of your questions in the Q&A section. There should be three options, I think, at the bottom of your screen: chat, raise hand, and Q&A. Please ignore the first two and make use of the Q&A section. That'll ensure that I and the speaker can see your questions and that they get answered. So I am very, very much excited about today's conversation. As I'm sure that you're all aware, this year has seen us in a global healthcare crisis. And on top of that, we're all sort of scrambling, trying to see how we can get our heads around this. And with that, this has also exacerbated a lot of the issues that we see happening and has begun to show the issues that we have not really dealt with as a society. So that being said, I'm very excited about today's speaker. But before we get there, as you know, this is our Dean of Student Affairs Leadership Conversations. So with that, I'd like to hand over to our Dean of Student Affairs, Jerome September.
Good afternoon, Vetsis. I promise I'm not sitting in the dark. For some reason, for the last 2 weeks now, whenever we go live, my light changes and it seems like the camera just decides that I should be in the darkness. Be that as it may, today I am excited. I'm excited because we're about to have a conversation around an issue that I think many young people are passionate about, and that is activism, changing our world, making their mark. And we often think about the class of '76 as almost that moment in the fight against apartheid. And of course, in recent times, we think about 2015 with Fees Must Fall, of being that moment when young people, or those two moments when young people stood up and said, up to here and no further. Our speaker today is someone that has made a contribution, not just in shaping this country, but really in shaping the globe. We are very fortunate that she was able to find an hour in her schedule to come and have this conversation with you. We're exposing you to Sis Linda Mafu because we think that she's got some of the qualities, she's got some of the life lessons that would be of value to you. And so as you think about your own role as a student leader, as you think about the contribution that you will make to the society, these conversations are about helping you on this journey. They are not meant to be easy conversations. They're not meant to be an ego stroke. They're meant to be a space where, in a very loving, in a very caring way, you can be exposed to other ways of thinking, to ways of being, and to ways of doing that might be very different to your own. And so I ask that you go into this time, into this hour, with really an open mind, but with a mind and a sense and a way of wanting to learn. Just a little bit about our speaker before I hand over to her. Linda Mafu is an activist. Her advocacy skills have contributed in ensuring that there's access to treatment for HIV, TB, and other opportunistic infections in South Africa. She also worked in sub-Saharan Africa, facilitating formations of civil society platforms. Her work is influenced by her passion as a human rights defender. She believes that through partnerships, for social change, we can make the world a better place for all of us. She currently heads the political and civil society advocacy team at the Global Fund within the External Relations Division. She holds an MSc, an MBA, and will soon be Dr. Mafu. So she's a doctoral candidate. And a line that we can really take from her is one where she says, the fire in my belly is always stronger than the fire outside. It's now my pleasure to hand over to Linda Mafu.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this platform. I want to first say all protocols observed. I have a history of forgetting to do all protocols. So thank you so much for the platform. Thank you for the conversation with our leaders today. Nkosi Diabonga. When we start a journey of leadership, when we accept this path, then we must know that it comes with amazing, colorful fireworks. We need to make choices about the fireworks. We need to make choices about how we deal with these fireworks. We need to sometimes walk away from them. And sometimes we need to be stronger than the fire. Like I say, the fire in the belly has to be stronger than the fireworks outside. Sometimes you need to figure out how to make them amazing, colorful sources of inspiration. Sometimes you need a bucket of water to just put the fireworks off. The most important thing is about making the right choices at the right time and taking the right action. So, who am I? I grew up in Gugulethu and lovingly called Gux, and it's a township outside Cape Town. It is one of those townships that were built as a result of the Group Areas Act during apartheid era. So growing up in Gux was both an amazing and also a challenging experience. It meant that I saw a violation of human rights on a daily basis, which fed into my activism. It also meant that I grew up in an amazing communal life where everybody was taking care of me, and so I was everybody's child in a true sense of it. My journey as an activist was honed within the Gugulethu streets. So whether I was walking in NY1 or NY5, those were the streets that were really building my activism, and they were also making sure that I am trained in a way that responds to social injustice. So in terms of the housing in Gux, if you would have a picture, the housing are built in a way that looks like a train. So, and therefore, if one house caught fire, then all the houses, whether there are 6 or 8, all the houses will burn down. So very early, as a young girl, I had to learn a couple of things. When there was fire, we immediately organize ourselves as communities. We organize ourselves to coordinate a couple of things. Coordinate who will bring water, who will bring the sand, who will shout the most to get more support, and who are the high jumpers to go in the house, get the babies out, and make sure that they are safe. So of course, I was one of the high jumpers, and I was very fast. So at a very early age in my life, I had to learn that the fire in my belly to get that baby and make sure that baby is safe is stronger than the fire in the room. And therefore, it meant that I had to build a lot of courage to make sure that I can contribute, I can make change in my community, and also understand all the different networks within my community and how we support each other. Now, so you know that what you stand for and what is inside you propels you to do the right thing. So you need to really be clear about what is propelling you as a leader. What do you stand for? What is your truth? What is the authentic you? What drives you? And you need to hold on to that, because that is what takes you through your life journey. So leadership is about taking care of yourself and also dealing with your issues. Growing up in Gugulethu, I then went to high school in Gugulethu, finished high school, went to university. I went to the University of Cape Town, great opportunity. I'm had opportunities to work with the different movements within the university. And that was really great in terms of honing my activist skills. It was an amazing journey. I got the qualifications. I got out of university. I went for my first job in my career. The first job was an activist position. So I chose a field of social justice, focusing on prevention of child abuse and neglect, and also focusing on gender-based violence. So I was fighting for the rights of children, fighting for the rights of women in general. And this forced me to revisit some of my own personal experiences as a survivor of child sexual abuse. And that was hard. It really meant that I had to relook at my own experience and how my own community failed to protect me as a child. And this is the community that I love, and this is the community that I felt actually protected me in many ways. However, in this one area, they could not do that. So my anger in that space became real. I made many decisions that were not propelled by the fire in my belly, which is about the injustice. I made decisions that were more propelled by my anger because I had not dealt with my head as a young girl. And one of the things that I made really huge mistakes, which included the fact that I resigned on the dot because I was asked a certain question, and I resigned with immediate effect and left the job. In many ways, that again was a loss to my community. However, the lessons that I took from that is that I need to be in a position where I deal with my own pain, I deal with my own issues. So, as you always say, hurt people hurt others. So I realized that I needed to take care of myself. I needed to stop a little bit and go to therapy and find other social support so that I could deal with some of these issues. I also had a baby girl, and I realized that if I'm not dealing with my head, I may hurt my daughter. So again, the investment in making sure that I understand what had happened to me, and I also learned to cope with it in a way that does not cause harm to others was quite important. That is also a sign of leadership, because if you are able to then identify some of your own personal challenges and deal with them head on, that is quite important, because those challenges may come up again in your own spaces. So the fact that I was focused on making sure that my daughter was safe, I was also dealing with my own issues, meant that I had to invest in my own mental health. So fast forward and get to a point where I've done the taking care of myself, and I continue to do so. And I move on to other positions in my life. So I joined Open Society Foundation, supporting rural community and supporting young people in starting their businesses. Most of the applications for projects at the Open Society Foundation were mainly applications to start up either building coffins or having a funeral parlor. And I did not understand where this was coming from. However, the reality hit me when most of my friends were dying around me, and we could not even talk about what was killing them, or we would talk about it just when they are about to die. And that was really, really painful. It was a painful loss. There was no action from the government in terms of dealing with what was killing many people. And the death was caused by HIV. And many people did not have access to HIV treatment. And that was a really challenging situation. I joined Treatment Action Campaign because it was an organization that was formed in 1998. And when I joined Treatment Action Campaign, I joined Treatment Action Campaign as a volunteer to try and look at some of the programs and how to support the organization. However, I then became their treatment literacy program manager, mainly to look at some of the information that was coming on HIV and HIV treatment, and ensuring that the information is consumable such that people are able to use it to find treatment, but also to fight for their lives and to organize themselves. And then I moved into a responsibility that was called the National Organizer. Basically, what I was supposed to do there is to mobilize communities and get as many people as I can who would be able to talk about HIV, talk about the access to treatment, and also their constitutional right to have access to treatment. I therefore mobilized communities working with different teams from different provinces, from different districts, educating and politicizing people around their access to treatment, and ensuring that we have a critical mass. For 6 years, my responsibility was to ensure that we have a critical mass that was making useful noise on the street every day until our government could provide treatment. There was a sense of urgency because people were dying. We were burying people Monday to Monday. And unfortunately, the government was not doing anything at the time. Now remember, this is 2000, and we've just had our own newly, elected democratic government. So we are passionate about this. These are our people that are leading. So how dare we stand up against them? And that was challenging both personally, as well as it was not acceptable by communities because we were standing up against their own government and our own government. And that was not acceptable, that was not popular. However, we spent a lot of time educating communities and making sure that they understood that it's their right. In terms of statistics, we had 900 people dying per day nationally. We had 1,400 new infections per day. So the cost of inaction was pushing households and communities into extreme poverty because the people that were dying were people that were actually working already and providing resources to their homes. So we had to fight. We had to work out how we have these conversations in a way that was respectful enough, but also noisy enough for the government to listen. We organized many things. We used many tools. We used the constitution. We took the government to court. We laid charges against the president, against the minister of health. We went to different police stations. We did many things. We went to Thailand to buy medication and brought it to the country, and we were arrested. However, we were making a point that communities should understand there is affordable treatment that they can use and they can have access to, but the government is not taking action. So that was really understood by communities. We organized civil disobedience. We were everywhere. But we also wore very powerful t-shirts that were written HIV positive. The HIV positive t-shirts were mainly to demonstrate that HIV is in our lives, and also the issue of dealing with the issue of stigma. We were taking risks. So leadership is about taking risks, and those risks have to be very calculated. So we were taking risks because we knew that Gugulethu was stoned to death as a result of speaking up and saying that she is living with HIV. So we were taking those risks, we were organizing ourselves, but we were also starting conversations with our communities. This led to a point where now in South Africa, we are sitting at about 2 million people on treatment. Although we have 7 million people that are living with HIV, we have now over 2 million people that are taking treatment, which is really amazing. We fought for condoms, and that was one of those struggles that were not really popular with everyone because people were not ready for condoms. But the reality is that we were not closing the tap in terms of new infections. And when we looked at the condoms, so the importance in leadership, understanding the evidence, getting the evidence, and therefore your advocacy is evidence-based. So we looked at the issue of condoms, and when we realized that actually, in terms of the condoms that were available, it was 8 condoms per person per year, meaning that people could have sex once a month from January to August, and then after August it was hunger strike, and then again they could start again in the next January. And so we fought for more access to prevention tools and technologies, and that has gone better. We looked at the different networks. So when you are organizing yourselves as leaders, one of the biggest things that you need to have in your pocket is the partnership and networks. If you don't have those things, you will not sustain your campaign. You will not sustain your issues. So you need to have really strong partnerships. So we reached out to different partners, including the unions, including teachers' unions, because at the time, at least 15% of the teachers were infected and they were dying, particularly those that were under 35. So we reached out to teachers, mobilizing them and using their language so that they could understand what we were talking about. We worked with different community members so that they could understand the epidemic more than the policymakers. So we wanted them to be able to articulate these issues. We worked with community organizers so that they could understand the medical terms. So you would have a community worker that has not been able to access education to the level of grade 12, standing in front of a medical doctor and saying that D40 causes lipodystrophy and we need to have access to Truvada. And that was very powerful because they were talking both from the heart and the mind. They knew their facts, they knew their things. So investing in getting the right information. So as a leader, one of the biggest things is you have to read, you have to get the information, and you have to expand your knowledge. That is quite important. Again, once you get your knowledge, you need to find a way of putting together your messages. You need to put together your messages and deliver them in the way that can be accepted by the other partner or the other party that is receiving it, because it's useless to have the right message and deliver it in a way that is not receivable. So you need to deliver it in a way that is receivable. That also means that you need to be able to move back and let someone else lead. So you can do an interchangeable kind of conversation. So if you let someone else lead, that can deliver the message better than you have to be matured enough to move back. That is quite important. And I learned that a couple of times in my journey. Also, when you get the seat in the room, you need to use that seat. You can't be just there to tick the box and to tick the register. You need to really represent others. You need to voice the issues. And sometimes, you are in that space and you can see and be intimidated by many people, including your ministers in the room. Some of them used to call me the 8th person. So as soon as I get in there, they would say, Upuntwe 8. So I was the 8th person. And of course, the most important thing was to speak up and be very clear about the message, even if the voice is shaking. I was able to pull on and think of all the masses that I was representing so that I could then deliver the message, which was quite important, and also report back to the constituents. And sometimes, the language in the room is high above you. Sometimes you have to deliver this message and the English just goes out of the room, or whatever language that is being spoken. But the most important thing is that you need to deliver that message, even if you have to use sign language. So leadership is about expanding your horizon and your networks. So I worked at a local level in terms of movement. I worked at the national level. I worked at the regional level. There are many stories that I can tell you at the regional level, the experiences that I had just working in about 15 countries in Africa, and just being challenged about the way that they organize, which is utterly different from the South African way of organizing. The way that we organize our movements and all of that, it's different in each country. And so I had to really learn how to manage myself, how to negotiate, how to push and when to stop as well in a respectful way. As I worked more in the global spaces, I was invited in international spaces. I've traveled in over 58 countries in my lifetime, and I have been able to represent in all of those countries. And I've had challenges starting from traveling at the airport and trying to negotiate, to getting into those boardrooms and not really understanding the language of the boardroom, but working with that because it's really stretching your skills. I am now the head of department in Global Fund. So the journey has been from Gugulethu to Geneva. So from G to G. In Geneva, it's different. It's a different space. And you can quickly lose your authenticity. You can quickly lose who you are, because it's a space that has highly educated people, diplomats. Everything is sugar-coated. You have to manage your language, launder your language. And so it's quite important how you then get into those boardrooms and use that space, thinking about what propels you, what is the fire in your belly, and being true to who you are and where you come from. You don't have to change and try the European or American accent. Just be yourself and deliver on the message that you are supposed to provide. So at the Global Fund, we mobilized $14 billion to support national responses on HIV, TB, and malaria in over about 100 countries, focusing on these 3 diseases. There are many lessons learned. Being authentic in that space is very, very important. So sometimes you are invited to speak, and you are working with your global partners. For instance, you are working with activists from America or working with activists from Europe. They usually write up everything that you have to say. So one of the biggest things that I had to learn to do was to say no. I know exactly what I need to say, and I'm going to say it in my own way and in my own English. And I'm going to make sure that people hear what I'm saying, which was not received well in certain areas. And it meant that I would not be invited to those spaces again. But that is important. They knew what I stand for. They knew what I was all about, but also they knew that they can't just think that they can write up things for me to say, because I was coming from South Africa or from Africa. So I did not really know how to say things. So I had to push back on all of those things. But that does not mean that you should not be adaptable. You should not be flexible. I have worked on those areas a lot because it's important to be flexible and seek to inspire others for greater good. And those are the things that I have worked with. You also need to pause and take care of yourself. It can be hectic. It can be really emotionally draining. And once it is emotionally draining, you need to stop. Because you may make lots of mistakes that would cost you. So I've taken lots of time to pause. I've also made many mistakes. You will make mistakes. So I've made mistakes, and simple things like just reading an email thoroughly before you respond. So I remember one time I read an email, and I just read the first line, and it raised all my red flags, and I responded, and I pressed send. and the email went, and then I went through the email and I realized actually the answers and the responses and everything else was already done, and I should not have sent that email. And it really can get to a point of causing unrepairable relationships. So some of those things that I've also sat in meetings and decide to stand up and march out because they are just not getting my point. And so there have been conversations where I've stood up and I said, why am I even having this conversation? And I would walk out. But you realize that I should have stayed, and I should have kept my cool, and I should have continued to negotiate, because it then become costly to the people that I serve. So one of the things that I have learned in terms of that, the decisions can be costly, so I need to just basic thing, read the email up to the end before I finish. And before I write up an email and say, don't you? And number two, I also need to sometimes write the email that I want to write, but send it to my Gmail and not press send to send to the person. Just send it to my Gmail so that it's just out of my system. I have also learned one of the things that really helps me in some of these spaces, particularly when the conversation begin with you people from Africa, and you know, you want to stand up and you want to say, don't you dare. I've learned to write a couple of notes to myself in my language. So in isiXhosa, and I would say and I would, you know, start writing up, and it helped me to breathe rather than to start shouting. So of course, find a way of laundering my language and tell the person exactly where to go. I think also I've learned that it's okay to apologize to a person when you have really messed up. And also I've learned that it's okay to forgive myself when I have messed up, because if you carry that and you don't forgive yourself when you have messed up, it becomes challenging, and you end up paralyzing yourself and unable to move on. Authenticity sometimes means that you'll be invited to these spaces, and you will realize that the systems are not relevant. And so you need to stand up and say, actually, the letter writing advocacy doesn't work for us. We need to do things this way. But you need to deliver that, again, in a way that is respectful. I've really worked with different places and different spaces where I have been challenged as well, challenging my thinking and being able to receive that, to receive the feedback and to receive the challenge, and also being able to say to myself, I need to change a little bit because the way that I'm doing things now is not serving what I want to reach at the end. It may have worked in 2003, however, in 2019, it doesn't work. So that is important. But that doesn't mean that the activists from Gugulethu has changed. I still take the language of the activists from Gugulethu into the boardrooms. I still take the language from the activists from Gugulethu into all these different platforms that I'm given, and shine the issues of the people that we support. So again, choosing the right people, working with the right people, and making sure that you open doors for others. I have learned to open doors for people as I'm moving on. So you lift as you rise, which is part of leadership. I think the last part for me that I want to share with you is about managing your work-life balance. In this world, if you have to travel to 4 countries a month, and in all those countries you are speaking, whether to the head of state, to the minister of health, to communities, it takes a lot from you. So one of the things that I have looked at is to make sure that I manage my work-life balance. It's hard. I have very important relationships. I am a mother to 4 children. I am a wife. I have a husband. I am a daughter-in-law. I need to make sure that those key family relationships are really managed. I have a daughter. I am a daughter to my father. I have friends, a group of women that, you know, we talk absolute nonsense and laugh, and I need to keep those relationships. I need to laugh from my belly. I have my sister, I have many family members, I even have a grandson, which is amazing. But I think just making sure that I manage my life in a way that I remain connected to all those life-giving relationships has been very important. The very last part that I want to leave with you is about managing my social media footprint, because it's very, very important if you are in a leadership position. You know, what you put like or the thumb on, the things that you follow, the debates that you engage in, the pictures, the videos that you put out there, they follow you. So you need to really be sure that you live a clean life in that space. Of course, you have to speak up in terms of human rights violations and many other things, but you need to launder your language, manage it, particularly if you are planning to come into international spaces like this ones. There's less South Africans in this space, and we need more. We need all these young people. We need your energy. We need you to push us out of these positions. So I'm hoping that one day I will be seeing some of you asking to be interns in our organization, asking us to support you to go to these public health conferences, so that we see more South Africans participating and bringing in this kind of the very rich support. Kondisa, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sis Linda. That was incredible. You dropped quite a few gems, and there's a lot I'd like to unpack from what you said. I'm starting with this idea of what propels you and what are your core values. And often as leaders, you know, you're still a human being, and there's a lot that you're dealing with, and it's often that you can bring that into your team. And with that, we have a question from Mathandam Debele, who says, do you think that mental health is something that gets enough attention in the world of activism?
Nope, it doesn't. It doesn't get enough attention, and we need to make useful noise about it. Because if we don't invest in that, we as I say, hurt people hurt others. So if we're not dealing with mental health issues, and also dealing with mental health issues starting from young people, not only with adults, but from young people, like in primary school, ensuring that they get mental health support is quite important. So we need to shout out a lot around that.
Definitely. There's one very important question that's asked by Gabriel Mackay. I think you touched on how a lot of the issues that you deal with are literally a matter of life and death. And sometimes you have to go to extremes when you're dealing with situations like that. And Gabriel's question is, as a leader, if you find yourself in a situation of life and death caused by what you are fighting for, do you back off and think about yourself, or do you continue the fight even if it'll cost you your life? And this is interesting because it's a question I've been asking myself very often.
Yeah, I've been in those positions. I remember we went to we were advocating for access to treatment in Frontier Hospital in Queenstown. And we were faced by police, and they were literally shooting at us, and they were beating us. I was leading the march, and so there were people behind me. So most of us as the organizers, we had to stand and be human shield. So that was the first decision, that no harm should get to these people. So we became human shield, and we were beaten by the police. Number two, we were trying to make sure that people are safe. So the same organizers of the march who were saying we are not going anywhere, were actually now shouting to the marchers, run. So we had to be the human shield, and also scream, run to the marchers so that they were safe. And they did, they ran. So you have to make that decision. It's a tough call. It's a really tough call. Sometimes you do go all the way, but if you are going to face harm, then you need to make a decision about that. And it's an individual decision, unfortunately. So for us, the individual decisions that we made was to be the human shield, and we had to. I'm still dealing with my backache even today.
Okay. There's a question here from Jesse Pretorius that says, Linda's insight brings up many parallels with our current situation regarding COVID-19. In which ways has our government and society improved since your initial days of AIDS activism? And what are the crucial areas to focus on moving forward?
So I think the government have really invested in trying to inform, engage communities, which is something that did not happen during the HIV time. Trying to explain what COVID is and what are the signs and symptoms and all of that, that did not happen during the HIV time. Also, in terms of just putting together public health systems to respond to COVID, that did not happen during and also having their own resources invested in the COVID-19 response is quite different from the HIV times. So there has been a lot of improvement in that. And I guess it's because of many people that have now been sitting in the leadership positions in the different health, Ministry of Health positions. So that has been helpful. They have an understanding and support, and also the investment has been strategic in many ways. Okay. But it doesn't mean that we should sit and not monitor that.
Definitely. I think looking at today's world, it can be quite easy to feel like nothing is working. So I think it's great to hear that the activism that's been done in the past is pushing us forward and has resulted in some changes. My next question is twofold. You mentioned a situation in which you left a boardroom in which you felt disrespected, and that in hindsight you might have dealt with it differently. How would you have dealt with that today? And in your view, are there situations that warrant walking out today?
Yeah, there are situations that definitely you should stand up at some stage, because if the conversation is not respectful, if the conversation is not going anywhere, then you need to take a stand and walk out. That is important. And sometimes walking out means that you will leverage a better response. So, but also in the situation that I was talking about, I could have done differently and gotten better results if I had stayed a little longer and negotiated. So at some stage I felt that I left way too early. So yeah.
Okay. There's a question here from Vuyani Magaulule, which is, what challenges do you face as a female activist in a male-dominated space? And how do you overcome these challenges?
Many things. First of all, the assumption that if I walk into a boardroom, I should organize food and make sure that there's tea and there's an assumption that that should be covered because the female activist will be there. The second part is that when there are roles, particularly leadership roles, where you as a female activist, you are ready to lead, but you are told that you don't have capacity yet. We need to capacitate our women, kind of language, which is quite irritating. So there are many of those. I think the way that I have responded to that, one was to challenge. So what is the capacity that is lacking? Or what is it that I can't do? So I need specifics. But it's not only in terms of male and female, it's also in terms of some of the, like for instance, if there's going to be a discussion on gender-based violence, then males in the space would say, Sis Linda, can you lead that discussion? It's on gender-based violence. And so there are certain topics that are assigned to women. There are certain desks, gender desks that are assigned to women. So if we're saying that there are challenges with inequalities, then the response, we need a gender desk. What is that? So those are the kinds of challenges in the movement that I have been faced with, and I had to really respond to and be upfront. And sometimes it meant that I would say to the groups, we are not going to have a gender desk. It doesn't make sense. Let's just have a conversation about inequalities and how we deal with those.
I think that's very important. I like the response to some assumptions that people make when they say you don't have capacity, and you sort of have to make them confront what they're saying. Yes. And then what they're saying by saying, so what is this capacity? Why am I the one running this conversation? I think you need to explain the logic behind that, and that can perhaps show someone the error in what they're thinking. And earlier you talked a lot about how you would love to see the youth showing up for these causes. And here Kabelo Mofokeng says, what are some of the opportunities for young people in your field? I am a young graduate from WITS, having earned a BA in Political Studies and International Relations. I would like to infiltrate the advocacy space, but I am not necessarily aware of the channels to follow.
There are many opportunities. Starting one, you need to look outside your borders in terms of the opportunities, because particularly South Africans, we tend to confine ourselves within South Africa. So you need to look outside your borders where the opportunities. Definitely, I can work with the team, with Jerome and others, to see some of these opportunities for you to go and learn, for internships, for just spaces for you to be there and also have a feel if this is what you want, because being in these spaces can be challenging as well. So you need to also assess, is this what I want? So there are opportunities, there are internships that are advertised by many of, and internships in the international organization are your way through to the positions in those organizations, depending on how you behave and how you conduct yourself. So if you are willing to work hard, you are willing to leave home, then there are many opportunities. African Union is providing those opportunities for young leaders. The UN is providing those opportunities for young leaders. In my organization, we do the same. So we can work things and see.
Definitely. I think as new graduates or young people, looking internationally can feel a bit daunting or a bit too far-fetched. So I think that's definitely something people should think about and look into, to see what is there outside. But to also remember, as you mentioned before, your digital footprint, because as important as your CV and your experiences are, what you project outwardly is also important, and people get that. So there is a question here. It's a very specific question. It says from Raton Tatakane, it says, in your opinion, how can we as the youth support or try to improve healthcare in rural areas in our personal capacities?
So you need to help us you need to help design some of the programs and projects that enable rural communities to understand some of these issues, public health issues, in a consumable way within the cultural parameters in those communities. We need that kind of information. We need designs. You guys have apps and whatever that would enable communities to get the information, get the treatment. You need to help us. We have a National Health Act in South Africa that says no one should walk more than 5 kilometers to access treatment or to access healthcare services. We need advocacy there. We need young people to call on our government to deploy and allocate the financial resources, domestic resources, to build the healthcare facilities nearer to our people. So that there are many things, investment in the healthcare, getting healthcare workers in the right places, not only concentrated in the districts, but also in our local area. So there are many things. Seriously, you guys have technology. You can help us with the digital health issues, and helping us to get the information out there. You can help us designing some of these apps that could be helpful. Not only the dating apps, but more, the health ones.
Yeah. So there's one more question here from Karuna Singh that says, I run a citizenship office. How can you assist us with positions for students volunteering in these spaces?
Of course, we can. I can have a conversation with Jerome and see how we can facilitate some of these things, and see how we can facilitate some of the opportunities. Not only in my organization, but I'm at a region where we have what we call a global health campus. So we have over 6 or 7 international organizations that are focusing on health that you can always benefit from. So definitely we can work out something.
Okay, looking forward to that.
Yes.
There's one more question I've got here, and it came up when you talked about networks and making sure that you network and that you understand your networks and the environments that you work in. Is there any advice that you have around the specifics of that? Are there networks that you should be aware of, perhaps people you shouldn't be engaging with? Because I think especially when you're new in a space, anybody that you can sort of grab onto and speak to and get to know to, you'll want to. So is there any caution or advice you have in that area?
Do your due diligence. Check the person, check the people, check, you have to really evaluate because you have a certain set of values. So you need to know that those people are operating in the same set of values. You share the values because if you don't, then there will be a clash. You need to be strategic in terms of some of the network. I always say, even with young people that are starting their careers, I always say your CV, your CV needs to be good. You need to make sure that you sell yourself well. Once you get that job, yes, you perform in an exceptional way. However, your networks are very important because your networks include the people that are going to take your CV into another boardroom and recommend you. So give those people ammunition in terms of how to support you. There's that networking. There's the networking in terms of your activism. Even that has to be strategic at all times. Due diligence is very important. Understanding the values and their organizational culture. Does it fit in with your goals? Does it fit in with your values? That is quite important.
Definitely. Thank you for that. I'd like to wrap up by touching on the points that you've raised, because as I said earlier, you dropped a lot of gems. I wrote 2 pieces of paper here so that I can recollect at the end, because I think there's a lot to touch on here. The idea that the fire in your belly needs to be stronger than the fire outside. As you put it, there are many fireworks that arise when you're in leadership, that you need to understand your networks and how to find the right people, but importantly, not just professional networks, but your personal networks as well, because you need to have that balance and that support, not just the professional ones. Looking into what propels you. Are you propelled by anger? Are you propelled for the desire for justice, for the desire to help people? Because that ultimately impacts what it is that you leave behind with other people. It's important to know when you should walk away, when you need to stay and fight, but also how to fight strategically and bring across your points when necessary. You need to know when to let others to lead, to apologize and to forgive yourself, because inevitably you will make mistakes, but you need to learn to be able to move over that, I think this is my favorite, to speak even if your voice is shaking, because you may be in rooms that feel greater than you sometimes. And to change when what you're doing right now is not serving you or is not serving your purpose. To lift as you rise and open doors for others. And to also just look outside your borders, to not just look at what's close. And lastly, to laugh with your belly. Yes. I think that's one of my favorites as well. But thank you. So I think this was so valuable for so many people, especially the youth, because there are a lot of people, especially at WITS, who want to get into the space of justice and healthcare and socioeconomic issues. And I think it can feel quite daunting. So this has made that dream feel a bit more achievable and realizable. So thank you so much for that. And with that, I'd like to hand over to our Dean of Student Affairs to do our votes of thanks and to tell us what is the next session. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. I see I'm still sitting in the dark, so hopefully everyone can hear me. And this is strange because when we were doing the test run, I was fine.
It was perfect.
So, yeah, it was perfect. And then we went live and the lights went out and there's no load shedding. In any case, my duty is twofold. So firstly, it is to thank our speaker, but secondly, to also give our students a sense of the next session. Says Linda, this was absolutely amazing, absolutely powerful. There are two things, because Kondisa picked up on the rest. I also have wrote down quite a bit, but there are two things that I just want to leave with our students in thanking you. The one is around the due diligence. So who are you connecting with? What are those people's histories? What do they actually stand for? What is their real agenda? And do you really, therefore, want to connect with those people because they might not offer you what you were actually looking for? And then linked to that is this one that you dropped at some point where you said, manage your social media footprint. And so what do you like? What don't you like? And we've often seen how people become famous. There was a big drama around the Miss South Africa, I think it was, pageant this year, when some of the contestants in their past had said some things that they may be not so proud of anymore. And but it's in their social media footprint. It sits there. And so this idea of the due diligence that you do, but in terms of other people, but the due diligence in terms of how you present yourself to the world. And so checking yourself, making sure that you put out there is really what you want to put out there. The other one that you spoke about was make useful noise. And so when you walk into these spaces, students, do you have the facts? Have you read? Do you know what some of the potential counter arguments will be? And so do you understand the culture within that room that you're walking into, so that the noise that you make is not noise for the sake of it, but it is useful in advancing your cause? And so as leaders and as activists is to think, I think from this conversation, it's about how you manage yourself, how you prepare yourself, how you make your mark, and how you carry yourself in an authentic way. I mean, there were the issues you spoke about around laughing from the belly, being yourself, all of that, but to arm yourself so that you don't feel disempowered when you walk into a room. So says Linda, if you were on campus, and we hope that soon, I know you indicated that Switzerland students, this is important for you as we go to level 1. Switzerland is thinking of going back into lockdown because they went out of lockdown with Corona, And then, of course, the behavior wasn't necessarily desirable. And now they're going back into lockdown. But Sis Linda, with borders opening, hopefully one day you'll be able to make a turn at the WITS campus, and we will then give you the little gift that we can't now give to you because of the virtual world. But thank you for sharing so generously. Thank you for sharing so authentically. Thank you for sharing so personally of your journey, of the lessons from your journey, and for being so open to respond to the questions that our students posed. We appreciate you. We wish you only the best, both in the current role and the future, even bigger roles that you are going to occupy. Thank you for that. Students, our next, we have 2 more leadership conversations of the Dean of Student Affairs left. I'm not going to tell you who the last one will be with, because that will be a very special one. But the next one will be a conversation with SRC presidents in particular from universities across the country. And the conversation will be about, and I hope you will join us and you will promote this one, because the conversation will be around, so you had all these plans for 2020, and then COVID sent you packing. What lessons have you learned as a student leader from COVID-19? How has that shaped your leadership experience? How did you then engage your campus and represent students? And what tips can you possibly give other students and student leaders in terms of how they carry themselves? So that's going to be our next session. And I want to thank you again for having stayed the course. I will definitely pick up the conversation around the opportunities with Sis Linda so that we can see how we make that available to you, particularly through the WCCO, but also some of the other on-campus agencies. Thank you once again. Have a wonderful afternoon. And Sis Linda, all the best on that side. Bless you and thank you for being you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.